Thank you so much for joining us for our annual update on Westbrook's partnership with the One Family Church in Haiti. You know, last Sunday we talked about how Pastor Kesnell and his wife Yannick got out of Haiti only to be called back there in ministry. You know, they found their way to the United States and were actually doing quite well there, but God called them back and they eventually relented and came, and they found themselves living on a piece of land that they had just bought, sleeping on their truck bed under this tree. From that humble beginning, they really sought to help those in the community in any way that they could. So one of the first things that you see in communities like Haiti in Haiti, is children who need care. There are lots of kids out there not being fed, not being taken care of. So one of the things they did relatively early on was set up an orphanage. And it's pretty simple and basic. I don't have a lot of good pictures of the rooms, but that's a picture of the rooms. You can kind of see they just had beds. We actually had a project at one point where we got a single dresser for the girls' room so that they'd have somewhere to hang things, which was very well received. In order to set up an orphanage, you actually have to have a school, or to be able to send children to school, because in Haiti you can't actually the government won't fund something like an orphanage. They don't provide any help or aid to orphanages, but they also won't let you have an orphanage unless you can prove that you're schooling the children. If not, you'll actually get in trouble. So people literally can't take kids in off the street unless they have a school. So the net of that is that they set up an orphanage and then they set up a school. And despite a lot of growth in the church, the burden of supporting the orphanage and the school became very great. They had many other ministry ideas, but they were barely able to meet the responsibilities that they had with these two things. When God called us at Westbrook to partner with One Family, we did so through the Global Orphan Project by providing scholarships and a meal a day for the children in the school. When we started the program, there were around 300 students, but with scholarships available, the school quickly grew to over 500 students, absolute maximum capacity. Now, if you just think about that for a minute, you know, Westbrook Church is actually sending more kids to school and is actually feeding more children 5 days a week during the school year than we have members in our church. You know, I was asking how many people we have at Westbrook, and, you know, adults, you know, maybe as much as 300, but roughly twice that number of kids we are actually sending to school every year and feeding five meals a week. It's truly incredible. Now, over this time, the church has really grown quite a bit, with a great deal of the growth coming from people converting from voodoo. You can see here on this slide 4 mass baptisms for new believers. They would have, it's not unusual at all for them to have a number of people who want to come to Christ, and they, you know, when they schedule a baptism Sunday, there might be 20, 30 people there who are wanting to be baptized and become a part of Christ's family. And like I said, it's fairly amazing, some of them coming out of actually practicing voodoo. Freed up to do additional ministry, One Family really stepped up their efforts to reach out to the community through crusades, mission trips, and by providing aid to their communities there. You can see here them just going out, setting up a stage somewhere, playing music. People gather around. They talk to them about why they're there. They talk to them about their faith. They've gone and done this in a number of communities. And then they also do your typical mission trips where they set up to go to a place, meet with another church there, maybe a smaller church, and just go out and minister to the community for, you know, as much as a week at a time. But one of their deep desires, one of One Family's deep desires, which they actually discussed with us when we first met with them, is to build up God's broader church in Haiti. John Gillespie has been to Haiti teaching church leaders 8 or so times. In this picture, if you can see it, that's him up at the front. It's a packed session. I was actually jammed in the back against the wall. We actually both were able to teach in this session. John has taught there a number of times in addition to that. I've come down and taught a few times myself. This is a picture of church leaders who are holding up their systematic theology books, which were actually provided by Westbrook. And while all of this teaching has been incredibly valuable, the teaching that Westbrook has been able to do, One Family has actually been teaching church leaders themselves in monthly seminars for years now, where they get together for one weekend a month with church leaders from all around the community. And it was a growing number of church leaders that were showing up every month to spend time just digging into the Word and learning. One Family actually dreams of starting a seminary in Quattaboquet one day. And as they did so, something incredible began to happen. Church after church started to ask if they could become a One Family church. So you might wonder why I'm showing this particular slide when I'm talking about churches. And the answer is because the floors at One Family have actually become a symbol for the church. At One Family, they use broken tiles for pretty much any flooring that they do. So what they like to do is they go to the store where they're selling tile in large quantities, and they just ask, hey, what do you have broken in the boxes? And pick up the pieces and put them into boxes, whatever they may be, and take them back. And obviously they get them cheap because most people don't want the broken tiles. And as you look here at this picture, you can see each tile itself is broken and would appear to have no value. But in the hands of a skilled craftsman, they come together to form something truly beautiful and functional, as has now happened across Haiti and even into the Dominican Republic and Cuba. As you can see from this slide, they've become increasingly skilled at weaving these pieces together, making beautiful things out of these broken pieces. So this is a picture of a number of the leaders at One Family across a lot of the different churches. I'm going to go through a few of them here, spend a couple of minutes doing that, won't capture all of them. But the place I want to start is with the guy that I don't even have a good picture for right here, which is Pastor Van El. Pastor Van El runs the school at One Family, and I don't have a good picture of him, likely because he's always in the background working. He's was too busy to go through a lot of the classes. He's too busy to hit a lot of things because this guy is incredibly devoted to the kids there. And under his leadership, along with the scholarships and the meals that we've partnered to help provide, the children there have moved up their average grades to above 90% in Haiti's standardized tests. And with that, they've actually been able to, they've actually become one of the top rated schools in the area. This is Garot, just a couple of pictures there. This church is led by Pastor Maxon, who is on the left. And Westbrook actually helped to build a church building there. When we first went to Garot, you can see the tent. We parked right there, and as we were getting out, you could hear beautiful music coming out of that tent, people singing and praising God. Since that time, they've actually Westbrook has actually helped them to build a church building that is now used, both by church members in worship and as somewhat of a community center, and even a shelter during hurricanes. This is the One Family Church at Mayasad, which is another mountain church. This church has seen strong growth under the leadership of Pastor Jackson on the left there, who's just one of my favorite guys in Haiti. And it now has over 200 members. I think it's around 250 members, which for a mountain church is really large, because if you imagine people kind of spread out across a mountain, they really have to come together to form a body of that size. So that's really a big church up in the mountains. When we first met them, they were meeting mostly outdoors. They had a building, but it wasn't big enough for them. But like Garot, Westbrook actually helped them to build a church, and they're now able to squeeze several hundred members into that building that you see right there, and very excited about it. And it did get finished, by the way. Those are pictures I took when I was there as it was being built. So this is the third mountain church, the One Family Church at Baptiste, which is led by Pastor Sharonwa. A few years ago, this church was falling apart and actually nearly lost all of its members. They had some disagreements internally. They didn't really seem to know exactly what they were doing. And so they reached out to One Family. They'd heard about them, and they asked them if they would come to see them. And so one family prayed about it, and they eventually sent a team to go down to meet with them. And a lot of the members who had left came back, and they pulled them together and helped them to reconcile relationships, and then also began teaching leaders there. And since that time, they've become a much healthier church. And one family's actually helped them to build a building over the last year, which is some of the last couple of years, which is some of the construction there. As the ministry has grown, it's grown into Cuba, although for obvious reasons, I've not been to Cuba. It's also grown into Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. There are now 2 one-family churches there. This is a picture of one of them right in kind of downtown Santo Domingo. It's primarily composed of Haitian refugees, which is a growing ministry in the Dominican Republic, because anyone that can get across that border, generally speaking, is, because of the conditions in Haiti. But it's also attended by some Dominicans as well, but it's really a growing ministry there and a growing opportunity to bring Christ to people. So I traveled to Santo Domingo in February of this year to meet with several people from one family. And as you may recall, it was already quite bad at that point. You know, honestly, with the pandemic, it hasn't gotten that much worse, because if you go through kind of what we went through last Sunday, the government was accused of corruption and embezzlement to the tune of billions of dollars. And it was sort of a last straw for the people in Haiti. And they started shutting down streets, setting fires, disrupting businesses, disrupting government, disrupting everything, demanding that the president leave, which it's been a year and he is not leaving. Even as things were deteriorating, the UN peacekeepers exited and actually left Haiti. And for people who have been in Haiti, I will tell you the up-armored UN trucks driving all around were quite a calming thing. I really think they had a good mission there, and they really kept things under control in Haiti. But with them leaving, with all the issues that were already there, lawlessness really started to break out, and gangs really started to grow. And these were the events that really started to cripple Haiti. We then saw kind of the supply chain disrupted and prices of everything going up, and reaching a point where, you know, people were starving to death. And then by the end of that year, and then of course early this year, the pandemic struck, and that actually did make it a little worse as they shut down borders. One family had actually been going into the Dominican Republic just to buy food at reasonable prices, and that was, you know, stopped being an option. So here is Pastor Kesnell, and I'm actually going to play video here of him describing conditions in Haiti from a few months ago. Like I said, hasn't changed too much. Might want to turn up your speakers so you can hear, and if you have any, I'm going to stop after this and see if people are able to hear it okay.
Maybe you could just talk a bit about what it's been like in Haiti for the last, number of months.
Chaos. The way things are now, upside down, totally. Upside down, and everybody's scared. Everybody. I mean, even the little kids, as long they can listen. Okay, they're scared of the street. They're scared of being home. They're scared of going to school, being in school. Any gunshot they hear, drives them crazy. So I can call Jimmy. Jimmy is a young man. He's one of my spiritual sons. He went to university. Come over. So people at Westbrooke can see Jimmy. and he's in second year in diplomacy, school, and right in front of the university. So he was out, and he heard that they just kidnapped two children for their up from the street, and then that same day in the same hour, a jeep with tinted windows turned right in front of him. I mean, his heart fell. He said to himself, "Oh my God, they got me." So, and when the car turned around and then left, so, I mean, he was very traumatized knowing that he doesn't know what happened, because the car, there were things on and the car just came right around him. Right. So he came home and then he said, "You know what, I'm not going back to the university." The class, how many students in the class?
42.
42 children. How many came that day?
11.
Oh, wow.
11 students in a class.
Yeah.
That usually get what? 42 children, students.
Yeah.
So you can imagine how crazy, they are, and things are very, very crazy.
So first off, my apologies. I didn't realize I'd accidentally paused the video there for a second. But when it was actually playing, were you guys able to hear that okay? All right, got some nods. Excellent. So, as you kind of heard there, conditions in Haiti have been really rough. You can kind of see these pictures of mass demonstrations, burning things in the street. It's really been a scary thing for people living in Haiti to deal with.
Maybe you could just talk a bit about.
So while there's ongoing violence and crime in the cities, people are also suffering in the mountains, as you can hear from this little update on Mayasad.
Mayasad, they're doing so because the way things are in the country. People who used to come to Port-au-Prince selling their crops, they can't. They, stay there, but they wanna thank you all for supporting them in construction of the church. So now they do have a lead over their heads, a solid wall, a bigger church. You can imagine.
So we've also had a number of projects going on in Haiti. Some of those have struggled over the last year or so. Wanted to give an update on the well project that we started.
What's the status of the well?
The well, those people at Blue Ridge, we've been going back and forth. They cannot really get on the street to visit, to tell us exactly what they are capable of doing. So he got the application now, and then he said, okay, so depending on how things are in the country, so he will give us a visit between 2 or 3 months, and then he can tell us exactly what they're gonna be able to do and drill the well for us there.
Amen.
So what he's talking about there, actually the company that's working with them to drill the well is out of the United States, and a really solid group there, but they've been unable to safely travel to the farm for months. So you have people in the cities who are dealing with all sorts of violence. You have people in the mountains who can't come down to the cities to trade, and you have people trying to do business who do not feel safe kind of going from place to place. So it's generally a bit of a rough scene, but regardless of those conditions, one family is continuing to press forward in its vision to provide at least simple church buildings for every one of their congregations, among many other things. These buildings become like community centers with activity most every day of the week. Give a quick update there.
What's been going on in some of the other one-family churches?
Well, as of right now, we are working in Cuba, doing construction, and last when was that? In January, we were there, and we plan on going back to visit and provide funds for the construction to keep moving. And in Sodo, we are planning to do the construction there also.
What's been
So they're continuing to build, regardless of conditions. They're continuing to make more things happen. Here are a few thoughts on some of the other ministries at One Family and kind of, where they've been going.
the women are still doing mission trips
Yes,
this year?
yes. For this year, in July, oh please let us pray, because we're going to have 1 week in Sodom doing the crusade and construction. While we doing evangelization in the area, we're doing construction, and then once we finish doing the evangelization in the area, we're going to still, keep on working there, okay, to keep it going, non-stop.
So as you can kind of see here, they're really not stopping. They're continuing to move forward in every way that they can. I will say, though, they kept going when there was a lot of violence and unrest. Some of the trips, like the one here in July, I don't think that actually came to fruition because of community fears over COVID, but they still plan to start up again as soon as possible. So I asked Pastor Kesnell how he's faring, how they're doing in these difficult times.
Is it like traveling around in Haiti now to do all this work?
Not easy. Not easy. But as for me, okay, I know that I'm gonna die on duty because I will not step down. There is so many people rely on us. And as the head of One Family, I have to keep on looking forward to feed the children, to help those moms and dads who cannot support their kids' education. I have to look forward to make sure that our foundation don't go hungry, because we are feeding about 100 people or more every day. Every day. So that put me in a role where whenever all the depots are closed in Haiti, I'll be traveling to Santo Domingo to get food to bring to Haiti to keep on feeding those people. I cannot quit.
Amen.
It's hard for me to imagine having the level of responsibility that I think has been put on some of these people. For One Family, it really means putting aside their personal fears and just getting out there to do whatever they need to do. I showed the picture to the right there earlier. This is Pastor Kesnell and several guys who were going into the DR, and then driving back, they would take food and they would put it in canisters, hoping that it wouldn't look like food and hoping that they wouldn't get stopped and have it taken from them. They actually had one truck stolen from them last year. So definitely an ongoing concern for personal safety, but they continue despite all of that. So this young man, Jimmy, is one of many examples of what I kind of consider the next generation of leaders being raised in Haiti. He picked up English from the Kesnells, and it's not 100%, but it's quite good. And I thought you would like to hear from him.
Why did you want to get a degree in diplomacy?
Why?
Yes. How did you choose diplomacy?
So, essentially, I like diplomacy So it's not really like diplomacy, it's relation, international, and development. So I love the children. So when I'm talking about relation international, so I want to work like about the politics and for the children, especially for the foundation. So I really like it. And I want to work for my country, so to develop my country.
So what he's basically saying there is that he's going to school because he wants to be able to serve his country. He wants to be able to work with the government as a Christian in government, knowing that it's struggling and failing, and that he wants to work with them, particularly to help children in need, to help Haiti to deal with the crisis that they have for young children growing up in Haiti, basically the same way that he grew up. So I see Mary Alley on. Here's somebody you probably want to hear from. So Yannick and Mary Alley have become rather good friends, and it's always nice to hear from Pastor Kesnell. But this is his wife Yannick, and I had a chance to sit down with her as well. Thought you might want to hear a few thoughts from her.
How's it been since you got the new generator?
Oh, fine. We have electricity almost every day. It's fine. It's beautiful. Yes. Because we don't have any electricity. The city power doesn't come.
Right.
If it wasn't for that, we would be in the dark every day.
So that generator to the right that you can see there, we actually donated that to them, and we got that to them just before the things really got locked down. And over the last number of months, they've reached a point where they're seeing maybe an hour of electricity a day on any random hour. So basically no city power. So this has literally kept them out of the dark and allowed them to do some pretty incredible things, like just the act of playing music on Sundays. People hear it and they want to come see what's going on. So this has been a real blessing for them. So here are Yannick's thoughts on the situation in Haiti.
I don't want people to know what's going on in Haiti because I don't want them to feel like Haiti is a bad place. People cannot live there. It is bad. But when you're serving the Lord, with the Lord, nothing is impossible. You know that He covered the place. He's always there with us. We don't have to be worried.
Amen.
It's incredible for me, kind of knowing the level of stress that particularly Yannick has been under for the last year, to hear her counting her blessings in these challenging times, looking at the things that they have. I think that's something she's really focused on. Do one more clip from Yannick.
As long as the children can eat 3 times a day, 2 good meals, and at night something light. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
Some places they don't have that.
So think about that. She's literally saying, almost literally saying, as long as God blesses them each day with their daily bread, she is happy. Those kids are being taken care of, and they've seen it happen day after day for them for well over a decade now, and pretty incredible the perspective that she has in seeing that. And thinking about our partnership with one family, I've really been struck over the years by the story of the shrewd manager in Luke 16. He wasn't a good man, and he squandered his master's possessions, but he was a smart man. And when his master found out what he was doing and told him he was going to lose his position, he started giving away his master's possessions to his debtors so that they would invite him into their homes after he was cast out of his master's home. In what I initially found to be a surprising end to this parable, the master praises the steward, and then Jesus comments on it saying, "The sons of this age are more shrewd in their relation to their own kind than the sons of light." Jesus then said, "And I say to you, make friends for yourselves by means of the wealth of unrighteousness, so that when it fails, they will receive you into the eternal dwellings." Like that manager, we've all been given all that we have here by our master, and we too should be shrewd in relation to our own kind, which is our fellow Christians. this is something I've thought about before many times, honestly. Imagine someday when you're in heaven and you see a great, beautiful mansion. The owner sees you and he runs out and invites you in. You have no idea who this is, but he seems to know you well. So you ask him how he knows you, and he tells you that he was once a homeless, starving child in the streets of Haiti. He had little hope, but somehow one day he was taken in to an orphanage. He was fed, he was sent to school. These things were nice, but much more important than that, he saw the love of God and he came to know Jesus. You know, we have already fed hundreds of such children and sent them to school. And in a country overrun by voodoo, many have come to know Jesus and have been saved. Even if many of us never meet them in this life, they're going to be our friends and neighbors for all of eternity. Aren't you excited to meet them? So I'm going to take a minute here and just kind of stop and see if people have any questions that you'd like to put out. So you're probably muted. You can hit your space bar or just unmute if you want to talk.
How are they doing, Tony, in the area of medication?
You know, that's a really good question. And I'll be honest, I don't know the answer. Everything's become so much harder to come by. And of course, Mary, you know that we've been down there and seen their pharmacy where their, you know, shelves were pretty well stocked. I would doubt that that's the case any longer, but I haven't even thought to ask that question. The discussions always go straight to food anymore.
Yeah.
But it's a good question. I'll follow up on that.
I wish you would, because I know now we, as the United States, are not allowed to send medication that still is okay, but it's got a date that they can no longer use it. Here, we can't send it to other countries even then. And so I was wondering how they were doing so that we might, if we have an avenue, help them out.
No, that's a great question. We'll definitely follow up on that.
Okay.
Hey, Tony,
Yes.
how are they getting food now? Because you said they can't go to the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, so the last week I kind of talked about the value of the Haitian good, which has just dropped through the floor. And it's funny because every year I've done a presentation, I've said the value of the good has dropped through the floor, and they seem to manage to find new bottoms where the you know, their equivalent of $1 is now worth less than a penny. So in Haiti, the price of the food, they basically said it doubled, and then they said it doubled again. So they were going over to the Dominican Republic, and they were actually able to, if you took the cost of having your passport up to date, getting the permission to go across, because they won't let anyone go across, drive all the way there, which takes hours and hours, buy food and drive back, they were saving a ton of money. So now that they're not able to get out into the DR, they're instead having to look at the different food depots. And Pastor Kesnell told me when I was down there, he said, "You remember that food depot that we went to?" And I did. It was a big warehouse-like building. It was just stacked to the rafters with rice and dried beans and things like that. He said, "I went down there the other day and it was empty." He said the owner was sitting on a pallet. He had nothing to sell. And so what they've had to do is they've had to go from place to place, figure out where there's food and buy it. And they are managing that. They actually bought a lot of food right before the border was closed. And they are now talking about opening the border again, and hopefully we'll do so soon. But yeah, so it's been a real struggle. It's not impossible to get food there. It's just hard and expensive. And when you're trying to feed, you know, as he said, you know, just at the Quattaboquet location, over 100 people a day, that adds up really fast. But good question.
Is Food for the Poor, that organization, able to still send food in? Because I know there were pallets of rice from them.
Yeah, you know, I don't know. I don't know how some of those other organizations are doing. We've seen people really struggling to go anywhere and to move things around. So that's another good question I could ask Pastor Kesnell the next time we talk, and just try to get a sense of if any of those programs are still working. The ministry that builds the business that builds the wells needs to be somewhat of a charitable organization. They still charge, but they're still down there, for instance, as I said earlier, but actually they're unable to get to most locations because they just, they're afraid they're not going to make it there with their equipment. So you can imagine the difficulty in transporting food around when the price of food has gone up and up and up and people are literally starving.
Tony, Cindy Johnson was asking on chat if you know anything about the unemployment rate.
Well, yeah, that's a great question. It's always been really high, and it kind of depends on how you look at it. The well under half of Haitians were employed in kind of a traditional sort of job before any of this stuff happened over the last year. It's always been estimates because they don't really do a good job with a census. They don't even collect taxes at the individual level because they're truly third world. But it was well under 50% of people had a sort of a traditional job then. They say in Haiti that everyone is an entrepreneur, and basically everyone's trying to find something that they can sell, find some task that they can perform for someone who has, something they can give in return. And so, but I'm sure it's gotten much worse. The young woman that Westbrooke sponsored to go through nursing school, she had been a kindergarten teacher, and she went through nursing school, and so now she has her nursing degree. She had been teaching for years while she was working through a degree, and now she can't get a job doing anything at all. So it's definitely pretty bad.
Tony, had any of the body at one family contracted coronavirus?
They have not. I've not heard anything about that. Although, if we're being entirely honest, no tests make it out that far either. So I mean, it's hard to say for certain, but there's a pretty small number of confirmed cases in Haiti, and you never know if that's because they're only doing tests in a couple of hospitals, which in the entire country, which wouldn't surprise me at all, or if they're, or if it's just not spreading that much. They've been very isolated, and there's definitely not talk of a lot of people, dying because of COVID. I haven't heard anything like that, but they're all scared because they know if they get any kind of serious illness, most people can't go to a hospital.
There's a question from Joy Waldstein that says, what are they able to grow or produce on their own land?
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that they have tried to grow, all sorts of, almost literally all sorts of fruits and vegetables, and you can grow all kinds of things out there. But that's where the well project has been so important, and why we keep trying to get the well drilled and the pump, because their land is extremely dry, and the water table is quite low, and so they're struggling to grow anything there. And so they've literally for a few years been trying to get a well drilled, and we're actually helping them to do that at this point. But of course now they can't get a team out there to drill the well. So the long story short is they can grow almost anything out there. It's always sunny. They just need water, and they don't have it.
Hey, Tony, it's Mark Whitey. Can I add a comment here?
Sure.
Not everybody knows, I went to Haiti in 1979, and some things haven't changed at all, but one of the things about the land is it's just flat worn out. As Tony said, they can grow. They have like 3 growing seasons because it's warm all the time. They keep growing and growing and growing, and the land never gets a chance to recuperate. and strengthen, and they keep growing. So even though there's land there and even though there's water, the land is so worn out, it just doesn't produce much at all. I don't think that's changed since I was there.
No, I think you can confidently say that has not gotten any better, unfortunately.
No, when we were there, that area where they're building the well, I remember looking at the dirt and wondering how anything could grow there because it looked gray. It didn't look like dirt.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. I've been a couple of places. We actually went to a parts supply store a couple of years ago, and driving through land that looked exactly like that, and they had a big gated area. And when you drove in to the parts supply store, it was huge gates around a complex, and with some of the money they were making, they had put in a well. And you drove in there, and there was just this lush green area where they were growing, all sorts of different produce. And it was just kind of amazing. I've gone a couple of places where when there's water, they've been able to really, do a lot. But to your point, yeah, I mean, we've also been out there and we've seen some of the saddest looking, skinniest cattle and animals, and just desperate looking situations out there in the farmland. But I do think water is definitely at least one of the big keys to that.
So they do have seeds to plant. Are they short on that?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, the big concern is really the well, because without that, I mean, if everything's as dry as Kay just described, which it has been, nothing's going to happen. So that's the thing we always wind up talking about. I think if we can get that taken care of, then they'll be growing a lot of food there.
My impression too is that they grow good crops up in the mountains and they have things there, but then they can't get them down to sell.
Yeah, no, that's quite true. A lot of people who live in the mountains live up there because you get above a certain line and you start getting some rain and the temperature cools down, and they grow a lot of coffee there. You see lots of banana trees and different things like that. But then up there, they don't have access to clean water or a lot of other things. So they're kind of these trade-offs. But then they do come down and try to sell things from the mountains. And that's like where we were talking about earlier at Maya Saad, they actually grow coffee beans and things like that, but they haven't been able to go down to Port-au-Prince to sell them for some time. But there is at least that. At least if you're up in the mountains, there's a chance that you have a fruit tree or something like that. Anyone else have any questions?
How are Pastor Kesnel and Yannick health-wise?
That's a rather timely question. Pastor Kesnel actually started having issues with his face a little over, well, maybe 2 weeks ago now, and it's turned out to be he was struggling with doctors there. I actually sent all of his information in different languages to Dave Lee, and he he actually determined that he had Bell's palsy, and we told Pastor Kesnel, and I told Pastor Kesnel that, and he then confirmed it. He went out on the internet and was like, yeah, you're right, that's what I have. And he'd already been to 2 hospitals and didn't know that. But so they've had a good deal of stress. Generally, they've been in pretty good shape, but it's been a tough year for them. And Yannick's been pretty high stress. When I went down to the DR to visit them, she was actually she went with Pastor Kesnel down there, and then she actually stayed an extra week just to try to get a mental break. Kesnel went back because he had a lot of things to do. She stayed an extra week because she needed time away. So you can see there's a lot of stress, but otherwise they seem pretty healthy. All right. Any last questions? Anybody have a doorknob question?
What are the two main things we can pray about?
Oh, so there's a great question. Some of it, oddly enough, starts to look like things we might pray about for our own country. I've been praying for God's peace to descend on Haiti, because the first thing that I think is crippling them, and like I said, the pandemic was just an add-on. Things haven't even changed that much with the pandemic, because they were already in pretty much the same shape they're in today. But people need peace. People need calm. People need to try to go back to work. The gang violence needs to recede, and the pipelines of food and everything else need to start up. I would say pray for peace. And on the other side of that, again, not entirely unlike the U.S., I would say pray for their police, because the police there are being overwhelmed, and some of them are, this is not the same as the U.S., but some of them are actually joining gangs. Some of the police are, when they're overwhelmed. And so there are some ugly things happening there, but they do have a pretty good size standing police force. And so pray that they would be strong, and that they would be able to also help to get the situation under control, because they relied on the UN for a very long time to act as, to enforce anything that they needed done. And with them gone, they're being bowled over.
Another question, Tony, is I realize that we subsidize the students at the orphanage and the school. Is there a need to, like was done with this young nursing student, is there a need for some advanced education help?
There definitely is. There's a bit of a struggle with that right now. Like, I was actually looking to potentially have one couple at Westbrooke help to sponsor Jimmy, the guy that you saw speaking earlier on the video. But as you saw from his video, he has stopped going to school at this point in time because he's afraid to walk there. So it's been hard to look to move forward on too many programs like that, because we're kind of, like I said last week, we're not even 100% sure what the school year is going to look like this year, even at one family. They're not sure if all the students are going to come, or even if they'll be told not to have school. So it's a pretty it's a difficult time for planning. And for better or worse, I think the big ministry that they've really taken on is helping their church communities. So if you think about, if you just go through the book of Acts and you look at all the things they did for people in need who are actually part of the church community, they are helping to feed and take care of people. You saw the story about Mark Kendi. When people get hurt, they can't go to the hospital. They've been taking people to the hospital when they need to go. They're really focused on the basics right now for the Christian community there, and then on mission trips and outreach as they can do it. So would love to get more people with, further advanced degrees and things like that, but unfortunately that's not too much of a focus right now. All right, well, I guess we'll go ahead and close here. Really appreciate everyone taking the time this morning. Really appreciate you guys coming on. As we discussed last Sunday, please pray about all of this with your family. If you believe that God is leading you to participate in this ministry, the first thing that they always ask for is prayer. And every week they pray for us. They get together and they pray for the people at Westbrook, the ones that they know by name, they pray by name, and then they pray for everyone else here. Please do that for them. They ask for that first. But then if you do feel that God is leading you to support them financially, you can find links to fill out the pledge card in the last few Westbrook weeklies. or you can contact the office. I think there will also be pledge cards available during the service today if you're going in. So thank you guys so much. Let's close in prayer. Lord, we thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to get to know your broader church. Lord, as we read through Scripture, we see in the New Testament churches coming together. We see when a church is in need, we see other churches in different parts of the world coming to their aid. And Lord, I thank you that you've given us the opportunity to participate in a ministry like that, that you've given us the opportunity to meet some of these incredible Christians, to become brothers and sisters with them, because, Lord, just as the vision for their church states, you know, we are all one family in Jesus Christ. And so we just thank you, Lord, for all of these people. We thank you for any opportunity you would give us to participate in your ministry in Haiti. And we want to pray for everyone in Haiti, Lord. We want to pray especially for all the people in the different one family churches in Quadaboque and through the mountains. And we also want to pray for all of the other people there, Lord. Just want to pray for peace. Pray that you would restore this country, Lord, a once beautiful place that has been truly desolated. Pray, Lord, that you would show your strength, and that you would do a great act in Haiti, and that it would bring great glory to you. We pray these things in your Son's name. Amen.